There is a moment in every soul's journey when the familiar world begins to feel like a coat that no longer fits tight across the shoulders, binding at the wrists, suffocating in its very comfort. You know this feeling intimately now, don't you? It arrives not with fanfare, but as a whisper in the margins of your days. A persistent flutter beneath your ribs that speaks of wings you didn't know you possessed. This is the stirring of the caged bird, the soul recognizing its own vastness, within the confines of a life grown too small. What once felt like safety now presses against your expanding consciousness like yesterday's shell around today's growth. The bars you once called home, your routines, your relationships, your very identity suddenly revealed themselves as limitations, as structures that once served but now confined. Jung understood this restlessness as the first trembling of individuation. That sacred process by which the psyche breaks free from the collective sleep of unconscious living. It is not rebellion, for rebellion's sake, but the soul's own intelligence, recognizing that the old containers can no longer hold the new wine of your becoming. The ego, that faithful guardian of the known, begins to sense something stirring in the depths, something vast and authentic that refuses to be contained by the narrow definitions you once accepted as truth. This disquiet comes in waves, doesn't it? In moments when you catch yourself staring out windows, feeling the call of something unnamed. In conversations that suddenly feel hollow, words floating on the surface while your depths cry out for meaning. In the strange loneliness that visits even in crowded rooms, the sense that you are becoming a stranger to your own life. The old alchemists called this the beginning of the great work, the moment when the lead of unconscious existence begins its slow transformation into the gold of authentic being. But first, there must be heat. First, there must be the uncomfortable pressure that signals growth. The chrysalis must crack before the butterfly can emerge, and that cracking always begins with the restless stirring of what wants to be born. Your environment may not understand this awakening. Those around you might see only dissatisfaction, where you feel the sacred fire of transformation. They may offer solutions to fix what they perceive as a problem, not recognizing that this restlessness is not a wound to be healed, but a doorway to be entered. The soul's evolution often begins in solitude, in the quiet recognition that the path forward leads through territory your companions cannot yet see. This is the paradox of awakening. As you become more alive to your authentic self, you may feel increasingly distant from the world that shaped you. The familiar landmarks of your identity begin to shift like sand dunes in wind, and you find yourself navigating by stars you're only beginning to recognize. Trust this process. Trust the intelligence of your own becoming. The restlessness you feel is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the surest sign that something profound is awakening within you. The fire has been lit. The journey has begun. There comes a moment in the soul's journey when the masks we have worn so faithfully begin to lose their grip upon our faces. Like ancient clay vessels left too long in the rain, the carefully molded personas we have crafted start to crack, revealing the raw, unformed essence beneath. You feel at first as a strange discomforter, subtle wrongness in the roles you have played so masterfully, as if you are an actor who has suddenly forgotten their lines in the middle of a performance that has run for decades. The businessman's suit feels foreign against your skin. The mother's gentle smile seems painted on with colors that no longer match your inner palette. The friend's agreeable nod carries the weight of 1,000 compromises that your soul can no longer bear. These are not merely social adjustments or midlife restlessness. They are the labor pains of a new self, struggling to be born from within the cocoon of your former identity. Jung understood this sacred dissolution as one of the most crucial passages in the individuation process. The persona, that beautiful and necessary mask we don to navigate the world's expectations, must eventually be recognized for what it truly is. Not the self, but merely the self's ambassador to the outer realm. Like autumn leaves that have served their purpose through the growing season, these identity shells begin to brown and curl at the edges, ready to fall away and nourish the soil from which something more authentic can grow. You may resist this crumbling at first, reaching desperately for the familiar handholds of who you have always been. The ego, that fierce guardian of continuity, whispers urgent warnings. Without these roles, who will you be? Without these masks, how will others know you? How will you know yourself? But the deeper wisdom of the psyche knows that every chrysalis must split if the butterfly is to emerge. This is the sacred paradox of transformation, that we must lose ourselves to find ourselves, must die to who we were, to birth who we are becoming. The masks that once felt like protection now feel like prisons. The personas that once brought approval now bring only the hollow echo of applause for a performance your soul no longer wishes to give. In the cracks of your crumbling identity, something luminous begins to show through the first glimpse of your authentic self, unadorned by the world's expectations, unfiltered by the need for acceptance. It is tender and raw, this emerging truth of who you are, like new skin beneath a healing wound. And though the exposure feels frightening, there is also an inexplicable relief in finally allowing your true face to feel the air. The masks are falling away, and with them, the old world dies. But in this necessary dissolution lies the promise of resurrection, not of who you were, but of who you have always been beneath the beautiful, sacred masks you no longer need to wear. There comes a moment in the soul's awakening when words begin to feel like cages, beautiful, perhaps, but cages nonetheless. You have crossed some invisible threshold where the currency of ordinary speech no longer holds its value. The conversations that once animated your days now echo with a hollow ring, their familiar rhythms suddenly foreign to your ears. It is as if you have learned a new language overnight, one that renders your mother tongue obsolete. This is the sacred disillusionment with the babel of consensus reality, the endless stream of commentary, opinion, and verbal debris that fills the spaces of human interaction begins to sound like static interference on a radio frequency you are no longer tuned to receive. Your friends speak, your colleagues chatter. The world continues its relentless narration of itself, but you find yourself listening from a great distance, as if through water or from behind thick glass. You are not becoming antisocial are becoming fluent in the dialect of depths. Silence has begun to reveal itself, not as an absence, but as a presence so full, so pregnant with meaning, that words seem crude approximations by comparison. In the pause between heartbeats, in the space between thoughts, in the moment before dawn when the world holds its breath, here lives a vocabulary that predates human speech, older than civilization, ancient as the first stirring of consciousness. In matter, the unconscious speaks in this primordial tongue. It whispers through dreams that resist translation, through synchronicities that mock rational explanation, through the sudden knowing that arrives without the courtesy of logic. You begin to understand that meaning flows like underground rivers beneath the surface of ordinary discourse, vast aquifers of significance that nourish the landscape of being without ever announcing themselves. This creates a peculiar loneliness, but it is the loneliness of the mystic, not the exile. You find yourself sitting in rooms full of talking people, feeling simultaneously connected to everything and alienated from the performance of connection. Their words skitter across the surface of experience like water striders on a pond, while you have begun to breathe beneath the surface, in the liquid depths where language dissolves into pure understanding. The grammar of this new language operates by different rules. Metaphor becomes more literal than literalness. Symbol carries more weight than fact. A glance contains more information than a paragraph. A gesture reveals what 1,000 words would only obscure. You are learning to read the hieroglyphs of existence itself. The way morning light falls across a wall. The precise quality of silence after rain. The particular shade of blue that appears in the sky just before the stars become visible. Your soul is teaching you to listen with organs other than your ears, to speak with instruments other than your voice. In this new fluency, paradox becomes poetry, and contradiction reveals itself as the native logic of the psyche. You are discovering that the most profound truths cannot be spoken, they can only be lived, embodied, become. There comes a moment in the soul's journey when the carefully constructed fortress of acceptability begins to crack, and through those fissures seeps something dark, something previously banished yet strangely familiar. You have spent lifetimes crafting a persona that gleams with social approval, polishing away every rough edge that might catch disapproving eyes. But now, in this hour of awakening, the very qualities you have exiled from consciousness begin to stir in the depths, like ancient prisoners rattling their chains, demanding not punishment, but recognition. The shadow does not announce itself with fanfare or dramatics. It arrives like twilight, gradually, inevitably, transforming the landscape of your inner world until you can no longer pretend the only light exists within you. Those aspects of yourself that you buried beneath layers of propriety, those impulses you labeled as unworthy, those raw emotions you deemed too wild for civilized company, have not disappeared. They have been gathering strength in the underground chambers of your psyche, fermenting into something far more potent than their original form. Watch how your environment recoils when authentic shadows begin to surface. The world around you has grown comfortable with your predictable presentations, your sanitized expressions of humanity. Friends and family have learned to expect your persona's consistent performance, and when cracks appear in that carefully maintained facade, their discomfort becomes a mirror reflecting back your own terror of being seen in full complexity. Their need for your simplicity becomes the very prison that has kept your wholeness fragmented. But the shadow extends its hand not as destroyer, but as teacher. Every characteristic you have judged harshly in others' lives, somewhere within your own depths, waiting to be reclaimed, not as vice, but as abandoned medicine. That rage you witnessed and condemned now reveals itself as your own untapped passion. That selfishness you despised becomes the healthy boundary setting you never learned. That darkness you feared transforms into the rich soil from which your most authentic creativity can finally grow. This is the beginning of Negredo, the blackening phase of psychological alchemy where all must dissolve before true transformation can occur. Like the ancient practitioners who heated base metals until they broke down into primordial matter, you now enter a process where your false securities must liquefy, where your borrowed beliefs must melt away, where your unconscious projections onto others must be withdrawn and owned as aspects of your own unlived life. The alchemists understood that lead contains gold, but only heat and dissolution can reveal it. Your shadow contains your gold, but only the courage to face what you have rejected about yourself can liberate it. Every projection you have cast onto others, every judgment, every criticism, every superior stance must now be recognized as disowned pieces of your own soul, scattered across the landscape of your relationships like fragments of a mirror, each reflecting back some aspect of yourself you were not yet ready to embrace. In this dance with darkness, you discover that integration is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. The shadow's invitation is ultimately an invitation to stop performing humanity and start inhabiting it completely, authentically, without apology for the magnificent complexity of what you truly are. There comes a moment in the soul's journey when the world grows too loud, too bright, too demanding, and you must turn away, not in defeat, but in profound recognition of what is required. The hermit's path calls to you now, ancient and necessary, pulling you from the marketplace of personas into the cathedral of your own being. You feel at first as an inexplicable weariness with the external dance. The conversations that once engaged you now feel hollow. The activities that once filled your calendar now drain something essential from your core. This is not depression, though others may name it so. This is the soul's wisdom, recognizing that the next phase of your becoming cannot unfold under the scrutiny of the collective gaze. Like the archetypal hermit of the tarot, you take up your lantern, that small, steady flame of inner knowing, and begin your descent into the darkness that nurtures. The light you carry is not meant to illuminate the path for others now. It is meant solely for your own deep seeing. In this voluntary exile, you discover that solitude is not the absence of connection, but the presence of the most essential relationship, the one between your conscious self and the vast, uncharted territories of your unconscious depths. Your environment may grow concerned. They see withdrawal where you see necessary retreat. They interpret your quietude as sadness when it is, in truth, the profound listening that precedes transformation. The world has taught us to fear to mistake it for loneliness, but you are learning the sacred difference. Loneliness is the ego's cry for external validation. Solitude is the self's invitation to come home. In this hermitage of your own making, strange and beautiful things begin to emerge. Dreams grow more vivid, carrying messages from the deep psyche. Synchronicities multiply, as if the universe can finally reach you without the static of social noise. You begin to hear the voice that has always been speaking beneath the cacophony, your own authentic voice. Raw and true and unpolished by the need to please. The darkness you have entered is not empty but fertile. It is the darkness of the womb, of the seed buried in earth, of the cocoon that shields the butterfly's becoming. Here, in this sacred retreat, the aspects of yourself that could never survive in daylight begin to unfold. The tender shoots of your truest nature, the wild wisdom that civilization taught you to tame, the creative fire that requires silence to kindle. You understand now that this hermit's journey is not a permanent exile, but a necessary season, like the mythic hero who must descend into the underworld to claim their power. You withdraw to gather the scattered fragments of your soul. In this darkness, you tend the inner flame with devotion, knowing that when you will carry a light that no external circumstance can extinguish. There comes a time in the soul's evolution when the heart becomes an ocean, vast and fathomless, capable of containing storms that would terrify those who still live in puddles of safe emotion. You have entered this sacred territory, now the realm where feelings arrive, not as gentle visitors but as titans, carrying within them the weight of worlds, the memory of species, the collective tears and laughter of humanity itself. Your emotional body has become a cathedral of experience, its chambers echoing with sensations that your former self could never have imagined. Where once you felt the modest rain of everyday emotions, the predictable patterns of happiness and sadness, anger and fear, now you stand open to the monsoons of cosmic feeling. Grief arrives not just for personal losses, but for the universal tragedy of separation itself, for every soul that has ever felt alone in the vastness of existence. And joyo, the joy that comes now, is not the fleeting pleasure of satisfied desires, but the ecstatic recognition of your interconnection with all life. It floods through you like golden honey, sweet beyond measure, carrying within it the laughter of children not yet born and the wisdom of ancestors long departed. These are the emotions of the self, Jung's term for that aspect of psyche that connects us to the eternal, the transpersonal, the divine mystery that pulses through all existence. Your environment, still operating from the ego's narrow bandwidth of acceptable feeling, cannot comprehend this expansion. They offer you labels: depression for your cosmic grief, mania for your transcendent joy, instability for what is actually the natural rhythm of a soul learning to breathe in deeper waters. They want to medicate what should be celebrated, to normalize what is meant to transform you. But you are becoming an alchemical vessel, aren't you? Learning to hold these vast emotional states without being destroyed by them, without trying to escape back into the shallow pools of conventional feeling. The ancient alchemists spoke of the vas hermeticum, the sealed container in which transformation occurs. You are becoming this vessel, learning to contain the full spectrum of human emotion without judgment, without the desperate need to fix or change what you feel. Terror arrives as teacher, showing you the edges of your courage. Wonder opens doorways, two dimensions of beauty your former self could never perceive. Rage burns through you like purifying fire, clearing away the accumulated debris of unexpressed truth. Love flows through your veins like liquid starlight, connecting you to the beating heart of the universe itself. This is the sacred madness of individuation, the willingness to feel everything, to become a conscious participant in the full symphony of human experience. You are no longer content with the elevator music of surface emotions. You have chosen to live in the concert hall of the soul, where every feeling is a note in the grand composition of your becoming. Welcome to the depths. Welcome to the vastness. Welcome to the terrifying, beautiful truth of what it means to be fully, authentically alive. Time begins to unravel its rigid threads around you, revealing itself as the grand illusion it has always been. The tyranny of the clock, that mechanical dictator that has ruled your days with its relentless forward march, suddenly loses its authority over the deeper movements of your soul. You find yourself slipping between moments like water finding its way through stone, discovering that the past is not behind you and the future is not ahead, but both live eternally within the sacred now of your being. Your awakening soul operates on a different temporal frequency, entirely the ancient rhythm of seasons cycling through death and rebirth, of tides pulling and releasing, of the eternal spiral that moves not forward but inward, ever deeper into the mystery of existence. You begin to experience what the mystics have always known, that time is not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean in which all moments exist simultaneously, waiting to be inhabited by consciousness brave enough to dive beneath the surface of ordinary perception. The world around you continues its frantic dance to the metronome of productivity, measuring worth in hours logged and deadlines met. But you have begun to hear the deeper drumbeats, the pulse of your own becoming that knows no schedule, respects no calendar, honors only the organic timing of transformation itself. Your environment may remain trapped in the mechanical tick of progress, but your inner landscape has opened to the cyclical time of the eternal feminine, where endings are always beginnings, and beginnings always contain their own completion. It is here, in this dissolution of temporal boundaries, that Jung's profound gift of synchronicity begins to reveal itself. Meaningful coincidences emerge like flowers blooming in the desert of rational causation patterns that connect across the supposed divisions of past and future, revealing the hidden order that underlies the apparent chaos of existence. A conversation echoes words you dreamed 3 nights ago. A stranger's gesture mirrors your grandmother's touch from decades past. The book that falls from the shelf carries exactly the message your soul has been waiting to receive. These are not mere coincidences, but glimpses into the acausal realm, where meaning operates according to laws deeper than logic, where connection transcends the limitations of linear sequence. Your rational mind may struggle to comprehend how the universe can speak so directly to your inner condition. But your soul recognizes these moments as love letters from the cosmos itself, proof that you are held within a web of significance that ordinary time cannot contain. In this eternal now, you discover that you have always been whole, have always been arriving, have always been exactly where you need to be in the great spiral dance of becoming. The dissolution of linear time is not a loss, but a homecoming to the timeless truth of who you are. Something stirs in the depths of your being, not the hot anger of youth or the brittle defiance of wounded pride, but something far more dangerous to the established order of your life. It is the quiet uprising of authenticity itself, the soul's refusal to continue the performance that has sustained your place in the world, but starved your essence of oxygen. This rebellion does not announce itself with manifestos or dramatic gestures. It begins as a simple inability to say yes when your deepest truth whispers no. It emerges as a growing discomfort with the roles you have played so skillfully, the masks you have worn so long they seemed to be your face. The archetypal rebel awakens, not with a battle cry, but with a soft, implacable voice that says, "No more, not this, not like this." You find yourself unable to laugh at jokes that once amused you, unable to nod along with conversations that violate something sacred within you. The social lubricants that once made interaction smooth the white lies, the polite agreements, the careful editing of your truth to fit the comfort levels of others, begin to feel like poison in your mouth. Your environment may interpret this as rudeness or withdrawal, but you are learning to distinguish between genuine harmony and the false peace that comes from self-betrayal. This is not rebellion against people, but against the tyranny of unconscious patterns that have governed your life like invisible puppet strings. The expectations you internalize before you could even speak, the projections others cast upon you that you learned to carry as identity, the collective assumptions about who you should be and how you should live, all of these begin to reveal themselves as foreign substances in your authentic system. The rebel archetype that awakens within you carries the sacred fire of individuation. It knows that to live from your center, rather than from the circumference of others' needs and fears, is not selfishness but spiritual necessity. This energy teaches you that there is a difference between being difficult and being real, between causing unnecessary pain and refusing to participate in the collective unconsciousness that masquerades as normalcy. You begin to honor truths that make others uncomfortable, not to wound them, but because your soul can no longer metabolize deception, even the kind that calls itself kindness. The rebel within knows that authentic love sometimes requires you to disappoint people, that genuine service to the world demands. You stop serving the false gaunts of approval and belonging at the expense of your essential nature. This sacred rebellion is the birth, labor of your true self. Each moment you choose authenticity over acceptance. Each time you speak from your depths rather than your conditioning. You are midwifing something unprecedented into existence, the unique constellation of consciousness that can only enter the world through you. In the quiet hours, when the world sleeps, something ancient awakens within you. The veil between worlds grows thin, and your soul begins to speak in tongues older than language itself, in the symbolic poetry of dreams. In the sudden flash of knowing that arrives without explanation, in the mythic patterns that weave themselves through your ordinary days like golden threads through rough cloth, you find yourself awakening not just from sleep, but into a realm where meaning operates by different laws. A bird appears repeatedly in your dreams, carrying messages from territories your rational mind cannot map. Numbers present themselves in sequences that pulse with significance beyond mathematics. Colors take on emotional weight, and landscapes emerge in your inner vision, bearing the quality of sacred geography, places you have never been, yet recognize with the certainty of coming home. The language your soul speaks is not the language of the marketplace or the conference room. It communicates through synchronicity, through the sudden appearance of symbols that bridge inner and outer worlds with startling precision. A conversation overheard becomes a direct answer to a question you whispered only to yourself. A book falls open to precisely the passage your heart needed to encounter. The world begins to conspire in ways that make skeptics uncomfortable and believers weep with recognition. Your environment watches with growing concern as you turn toward practices they cannot quantify or control. Meditation becomes more compelling than networking. Solitary walks in nature feel more nourishing than social gatherings. You find yourself drawn to ancient wisdoms, to indigenous ways of knowing, to practices that honor the invisible dimensions of existence. What others dismiss as escapism reveals itself as the most practical orientation possible, a way of being that acknowledges the full spectrum of reality rather than merely its material surface. The vision quest is not a luxury of the privileged few, but the birthright of every soul willing to venture beyond the boundaries of consensus reality. Like the shamans of old who journeyed into other worlds to retrieve lost pieces of the community's wholeness, you begin to navigate territories that exist in the spaces between thoughts, in the pores between heartbeats, in the eternal now that lives at the center of all temporal experience. Your compass points no longer align with external validations or societal expectations. Instead, you orient yourself by the subtle magnetic pull of meaning, by the resonance that thrums through your bones when you encounter truth, by the quiet satisfaction that comes from honoring both the seen and unseen dimensions of your existence. The vision quest reveals that authenticity is not a destination but a way of traveling with eyes open to both the physical road beneath your feet and the luminous pathways that spiral through the depths of your soul. In this communion with the symbolic realm, you discover that what others call mystical is simply the natural language of a psyche that has remembered its cosmic citizenship. A strange alchemy begins to work within youth. The deeper you descend into your own unique nature, the more you touch something utterly universal. It is as if, by becoming most fully yourself, you have stumbled upon the archetypal core that connects all human souls. Yet paradoxically, this very connection to the eternal human story makes you feel increasingly alien in your immediate world. You sit in familiar rooms with familiar faces, yet feel as though you are speaking a language they no longer comprehend. The conversations that once sustained you now feel thin, translucent, lacking the weight of genuine exchange. You have touched something profound in your depths, the raw material of existence itself, and now the surface dwellings of ordinary discourse cannot satisfy your hunger for authentic encounter. This is individuation's cruel gift, to make you both more human and more solitary. As your persona dissolves and your authentic self emerges, you discover that few can meet you in this undefended place. The mask you once wore was not just your protection, it was your passport to the collective, your membership card in the great unconscious agreement of surface living. Without it, you stand naked in your truth, and the naked truth is often unwelcome. At dinner parties, you begin to understand why Jung spoke of the individuated soul as necessarily lonely, not because you are broken or antisocial, but because consciousness itself creates distance. To see clearly is often to see alone. To feel deeply is to feel beyond the comfortable parameters that keep most relationships safely shallow. You have become a stranger to your own tribe, not through rejection, but through evolution. Yet in this sacred isolation, something remarkable occurs. The very loneliness that separates you from the unconscious masses connects you to all who have walked this path before. You feel the presence of every mystic, every artist, every soul who has dared to dive beneath the surface of consensus reality. Your alienation becomes your initiation into an invisible fellowship of the awakened. You learn to hold this paradox without demanding resolution to be simultaneously the most isolated and most connected being in the room. The loneliness is not a problem to be solved, but a station to be honored. It is the loneliness of the lighthouse keeper, the night watchman of consciousness, the one who tends the flame while others sleep in quiet moments. You touch something vast and wordless, the collective, unconscious itself, that deep reservoir of shared human experience that transcends all personal boundaries. You realize that your individuation has not separated you from humanity, but has led you to its very heart. The more authentically yourself you become, the more you embody what is eternally human. This paradox becomes your dwelling place, everywhere and nowhere, alien and archetypal, profoundly alone and mysteriously united with all that breathes. In the deepest chambers of your transformation, something remarkable begins to bloom, a compassion so vast and tender that it encompasses not only your own struggling humanity, but extends like morning light to touch every soul still walking in darkness. This is not the conditional sympathy of the ego, which judges and measures suffering, but the unconditional love of the self, which sees all pain as sacred, all struggle as holy work. The journey inward has taught you to hold your own contradictions with gentle hands. You have learned to embrace the frightened child within you, the wounded adolescent, the confused adulthood, the fragmented aspects of yourself that once seemed unworthy of love. In making peace with your own inner council of voices, you have developed the capacity to witness others with the same merciful understanding. Now, when you encounter those still caught in the web of unconscious patterns, you no longer feel the old irritation or judgment. Instead, you see their struggles as echoes of your own former captivity. The colleague who manipulates others for approval becomes visible to you as a soul terrified of abandonment. The friend who judges harshly reveals themselves as someone at war with their own shadow. The family member who clings desperately to control shows you a heart breaking from the illusion of separation. This seeing is not passive observation, but active love in motion. Jung spoke of the transcendent function, that mysterious process by which seemingly irreconcilable opposites find synthesis. You have become a living embodiment of this function, able to hold both your evolved consciousness and your compassion for those still evolving, without losing yourself in either extreme. The bridge you have built between worlds is constructed from understanding rather than accommodation. You no longer abandon your authentic center to make others comfortable, nor do you withdraw into spiritual superiority. Instead, you learn the delicate art of remaining true to your inner knowing, while extending genuine empathy to those operating from different levels of awareness. This compassion becomes your greatest strength and your most refined challenge: to love without trying to fix, to understand without enabling unconsciousness, to remain open without becoming a reservoir for others' unprocessed emotions. These are the skills of the mature soul, the gifts that come only through having walked the difficult path of your own transformation. In your presence, others begin to sense possibilities they cannot yet name. Your compassionate witnessing creates space for their own awakening, should they choose it. You become a lighthouse, not forcing ships to shore, but simply shining your light into the darkness, trusting that those ready to navigate by your beacon will find their way. The great paradox reveals itself. The more authentically yourself you become, the more capable you are of truly loving others. Individuation, far from being a selfish pursuit, transforms you into a vessel of service to the collective human journey. And so you arrive at the profound recognition that is echoed through the ages, that all journeys of the soul are not journeys at all, but what you have taken for progress reveals itself as a sacred spiral, each revolution carrying you not forward but deeper, not away from where you began, but closer to the eternal truth that was always present, waiting patiently beneath the surface of your searching. The challenges that seem to block your path now reveal themselves as the very stepping stones of your becoming. Each moment of alienation from your environment, each painful friction between your emerging authenticity and the world's demands, has served the greater purpose of polishing the diamond of your consciousness. You begin to see, with the eyes of the mystic, what Jung understood so clearly, that opposition is not the enemy of growth, but its most faithful servant. This is the sacred principle of enantiodromia, the soul's innate wisdom that knows when to swing into apparent contradiction in order to find its true center. Like a master dancer who must lean far to one side to maintain perfect balance, your psyche has moved through seeming extremes, not as chaotic wandering, but as precise navigation toward wholeness. The periods of darkness were not departures from your path, but essential sojourns into the fertile soil where new life gestates in silence. You understand now that your evolution has never been dependent upon your environment's cooperation, but has instead been catalyzed by the very resistance it provided. The sacred tension between your awakening soul and the sleeping world around you has served as the friction necessary to kindle the flame of your individuation. Without the pressure of coal, there can be no diamond. Without the constraint of the riverbank, there can be no focused power in the water's flow. Each cycle of death and rebirth, you have experienced each shedding of old skins, each dissolution of familiar identities, each terrifying leap into unknown territories of being has been both ending and beginning, both completion and commencement. The spiral nature of consciousness means that you return again and again to the same essential themes, but never at the same level, never with the same understanding, never as the same person who first encountered these eternal mysteries. This is the great secret hidden in plain sight, that the goal was never to escape the human condition, but to inhabit it so fully, so consciously, that it becomes transparent to the divine intelligence working through it. Your journey continues, not despite the limitations of your world, but because of the creative possibilities they engender. Each challenge becomes a question the universe is asking of your soul, and each response deepens your capacity to serve as a bridge between heaven and earth. The eternal return is not repetition, but revelation, the gradual unveiling of what has always been true, waiting patiently for consciousness, courageous enough to recognize itself in the mirror of existence.